It was a sunny day in September 2005. On that day, a dragonfly caught my eye belatedly through the slit in the sinfully smoky window of the fifth-floor entryway where my apartment was located. For some reason, I knew then that something special was going to happen today. But the time passed quietly and without adventure until evening. At about 9 o'clock, however, a heavy downpour hit the dark street, followed by a flash of lightning and a peal of thunder. I was sitting on the mat near the front door, smoking a cigarette. From below, I could hear the footsteps of people coming upstairs, the voices and laughter of young girls. Eventually, I saw my neighbor down the hall. He had, as usual, some angry, sullen expression on his face. He had moved in a year ago and was rude and unsociable. He greeted the other tenants with a nod of his head. Old ladies sitting on the benches and breathing in the air in the yard said he was some kind of maniac, given his appearance. But this man wasn't hurting anyone. I got up from my seat to skip a couple. The neighbor barely nodded his head at me, and the girl said with a cute smile, "Hello," I nodded back at them. They closed the door and I finished my cigarette and entered the house. While frying chicken cutlets in a pan, I nonchalantly watched the sports channel to pass the time. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found my neighbor, who unexpectedly asked to borrow a chisel and hammer. An unexpected request, of course, but I gladly rummaged in the pantry and brought him the tools he needed. I hoped, now maybe we can finally be friends. The neighbor went back to his apartment, and I ran into the kitchen. How delicious and hot and mustard-smelling it was in there. I savored my bachelor dinner, listening to the banging of the hammer behind the wall. What did the neighbor break? Perplexed me. After I brought home a young girl, I took the time to bang something with a hammer. Suddenly, however, the knocking stopped, and the doorbell rang again. Leaving the food on the kitchen table, I opened the door and froze on the threshold. Across the threshold stood the same neighbor with a broken hammer and a dull chisel. With a guilty smirk, he handed me the damaged tools and immediately demanded a drill. I accepted the hammer and chisel without indignation and offered him an electric drill. I nodded "thank you," and the man left. I then proceeded to finish the rooftop. I could hear the noisy sound of the drill behind the wall, and I sat there brooding in a way that the ancient philosopher Diogenes would never have walked into a barrel. What's he digging in there? I thought. Suddenly, the oppressive sound stopped, and my doorbell rang again. I opened it, and again there was the same man with a crooked drill in his hand, and also with a drill. He held it out to me and said, "Give me the drill." I gritted my teeth and handed him the tool too. I heard a rumble outside the door. What is he doing in there? Maybe he really is a madman who tortures his victims, and I'm giving him the tools. I should have told him there was nothing at home, everything at the cottage. I wonder what will happen, I thought, but suddenly the doorbell rang again. He stood there, drenched in sweat, out of breath, but with a satisfied smile on his face. He took a breath, thanked me for my help, and handed me what looked like a punching machine. "Cool, virgin. I could hardly type that," the man commented, laughing hysterically in the hallway. I was instantly relieved. I tried to watch TV, thinking, good thing I'm not a maniac. It was 2002. At that time, I had just moved from the countryside to the city, was renting a cheap one-room apartment from a good friend, and was working as a worker at a pipe plant. And so, one Friday after work, I decided to go out for dinner at a beer store called Golden Fish. There, however, he had a little run-in with some southern guys he didn't know. One thing led to another, and things went downhill from there. They hit him over the head with a beer bottle, even cut his skin, and stitched him up in the hospital emergency room. But luckily, they didn't take anyone to the police station, and I managed to escape before the police arrived and hid in an alley. By the way, it was early September. I had a headache for about a month, but somehow it went away on its own. In general, I lived an ordinary life. But in November, when there was already a light frost, suddenly something inexplicable happened. I woke up in the dark in the bushes, not far from the wooden hut of a busy Roma family on the outskirts of town. It was a 15-minute walk from my house to theirs. I was not wearing my winter jacket, which I had just put on because of the cold. I got up from the snow-covered ground, shook my body and looked around, but I didn't remember or see anything. I slept unconscious on the couch in the house and woke up in the Yakuza area. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. I didn't even have a watch, so I don't know what time it is. But I was lucky because I had my apartment key in my pocket, so I had no trouble getting to my house, where I found that it was already 3:30 in the morning. After sleeping until 6 a.m., I went to work, but I didn't say anything to my coworkers. Of course, I thought I might be sleepwalking. Moreover, a month and a half earlier, I had refused to be hospitalized after hitting my head. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Then I read in the local paper that morning, when I woke up on the street, the strangled body of a homeless man had been found in the same spot, not far from the barracks. The police asked for witnesses to come forward. In short, I still didn't know the truth about what had happened to me that night, and who killed that homeless man. But such a mystical incident never happened to me again. Notes of a new pathologist. Day 1, 9:00 a.m. This is my first day at my new job. So far I've only seen corpses in the infirmary, but today I have a guy with a heart attack and a girl with a heart attack. So you can have a safe breakfast at work today. 3:00 p.m. Okay, new delivery. Looks like grocery shopping. But back to work. Female, approximately 23 years old. Brunette, 4 broken ribs, collapsed lung, but oddly enough, death by exsanguination, deep incision along right arm. There should be another one on the left arm, but without the arm itself, it cannot be confirmed. The incision is indeed exactly 2.5 centimeters. It is strange that only a professional surgeon can perform such an operation with a scalpel. A dissection is performed. The chest is stuffed with what looks like blood-soaked black peony petals. Further examination of the body reveals nothing. Another new corpse. A 17-year-old woman, brown hair, numerous bruises on her abdomen, back, and neck. Again, the cause of death was exsanguination. This time the femoral artery had been severed. Inside Our Lady is the same pedal. It looks like we have a lunatic on our hands. Pedals in the chest cavity. What does that mean? Day 6. Same story again. Woman, this time hairless, 25 years old, multiple stab wounds to the neck, but died of a brain hemorrhage. None of the stab wounds were bloody, so they were inflicted post-mortem. This time, the pedals were shoved into the victim's uterus. Frankly, I'm surprised the police haven't caught the killer yet. Day 8. An elderly pathologist came by today, and we had an insanely fun conversation over tea. He told me that when he worked there for a year, at least twice a week, a woman came to him with petals and various organs. Day 10. This time, an elderly pathologist was sitting at my desk. Apparently, he had noticed the identity of the killer, but had not had time to report it. The cause of death was strangulation, although there were marks on the neck where it had been cut with a thin wire. At autopsy, a whole flower, not a pedal, was found in the right lung. The rest of the diary was empty. The coroner told the sheriff. Had he been working in the morgue all this time? The sheriff exclaimed. If it hadn't been for the last pathologist, he'd have been working there a long time. But when I went back to his house the next day, I noticed something strange. All the books in his office were dusty except one. That book turned out to be his diary. Going to his old job, where he wrote to pathologists, was strange, like a horror movie. When the new pathologist invited me to tea, I hesitated, but I agreed. The tea went pleasantly. We talked about the countries I had been to and about my graduate school. But when I asked about the victims of the madmen, my companion's pleasant smile was replaced by a surprised grimace. I told him that when I worked here, women were often admitted to the hospital with piddles in their internal organs, and the look on his face made me very wary. I think any new pathologist would have been horrified by such a mutilated corpse at first. When he noticed my bewilderment, his expression immediately changed. He had a rash on both his hands and face, and when I asked him where it came from, he said it was allergies, so I left it at that. Throughout the tea party, there was an eerie, nostalgic smell in the room. The first thing I did when I got home was sit down on the bed and start remembering where I knew him from. After a few minutes of nostalgia, I forgot about everything and moved to the library to read something interesting. But to my surprise, I saw a shadow flicker by the window. Worried, I tried to run to the phone, but saw that the front door was open. I quickly locked myself in the library and wondered what I should do now. I took out my diary and started writing everything down so that if I died, the police could recreate the situation. There was a knock on the door. Whoever it was knocked completely silently and ruthlessly. I could smell it again. The smell that had kept me awake all day. A cold sweat broke out on my face, and I remembered. That pathologist had smelled the black peony found in the victim's organs. The tremors had stopped, but I saw him rushing around the house, looking for something to open the doors with. I knew, however, that the spare keys to all the rooms were in the living room. For the next few minutes, I thought he was going to find the keys and kill me. I wrote this in the hope that the police would arrest him and put him in jail. I heard him put the key in the lock. I hid the diary on one of the shelves, hoping someone would find it.